Hey everyone, if you're new here, welcome. My name is Keisha and today I'm going to be introducing you to a new series on my channel called Steeped Reads. So in case you don't already know this about me, I love books and I also love tea. And I really wanted to find a way to incorporate that on my channel, so I decided to create Steeped Reads, which is going to be a series of videos that I will post probably sporadically, just whenever I have ideas, where I will talk about some of my favorite books and some of my favorite teas. So this could be things like my 5 favorite books of all time or my 5 favorite books in a certain genre. And the teas will not necessarily correlate with anything. It's not like I'm matching the books and the teas together. I will just be talking about some of my different favorite teas and hoping that you will get some good book recommendations and tea recommendations to enjoy while you're reading your book. But before we get started, I do want to go ahead and tell you a little bit about my tea background. So I have been a coffee drinker for most of my life and did not really like hot tea for a really long time. It actually wasn't until I tried loose leaf tea that I realized that I really enjoyed tea. I used to drink tea bags, and the thing about tea bags is that the tea leaves in those bags are typically ground so finely that you don't get a very potent tea after steeping. So every time that I tried tea, I was like, this just tastes like mildly flavored water or watered down something. So I wasn't really a huge fan of tea, and I also really didn't know how I liked my tea. But once I started trying loose leaf teas and adding a little bit of honey and a little bit of Splenda or sugar, then I decided that I liked teas. So another thing that has really gotten me hooked on teas is Sipspa. Now, this video is not sponsored by Sipspa. I do not work with Sipspa. I pay my monthly dues to Sipspa's subscription box. But Sipspa has really opened my eyes to a whole new world of teas, and I love this company so much, so I don't need to be paid in tea or in money to tell you guys that you need to try Sipspa. So basically what it is you pay $15 or $16 a month for this box. Hello friends, it's Editing Keisha here. I forgot to mention one of the best things about Sipspa, and that is you get to choose your own teas, kind of. So you take a tea taste test to kind of let the Sipspa crew know what kind of teas you enjoy. That way they can kind of curate this box to your taste. So I don't know why I forgot to mention that. That's one of the best parts of this box, is that I know most of the time what I'm going to get. Even though I'm trying new teas, it's within a realm of things that I do enjoy. So I had to go ahead and plug that back in there since I forgot to say it. And what you get is they send you these little tea bags that you can use, which I don't usually use them because, like I said, I don't really use tea bags. I have my own steepers, which you'll see in this video. But they also send you so this is my August teas, and it tells you about the 4 different kinds of teas that I have in my box. They tell you how long to steep them, what temperature water that you need, all the different ingredients in the teas. This is just telling me to refer a friend. And then you get different kinds of teas. So these are the different teas that I got. So you guys are actually getting extra today. I haven't tried any of these yet, but this one is Sun Shower Spice from Rainy Day Tea Company. Some of the teas are caffeine free, some of them are not. This one is. I also got Churchill's Fine Teas French Vanilla Black Tea. And then Steep and Sip Tea with a Purpose. This is Charles Gray. And then I got, I don't know how to pronounce this, Chez Lulu Maison Douce. I don't know. Eclair a la Vanille. My only good accent is my country accent that you're getting right now. I also don't know how to speak French, but that's what comes in a Sipspa box. It usually gets you, it's like $1 per cup of tea, so it's really worth your money in my opinion. And if it wasn't for Sipspa, I honestly would not have found all of the amazing teas and tea companies that I have come across, and I wouldn't have found my favorite teas. So I did feel like I kind of owed it to Sipspa to mention them, because it is honestly in large part because of them that I love tea as much as I do. We'll talk a little bit more about teas throughout this video. I'm going to be sharing today 4 teas with you that are my favorite teas, and most of them I have discovered through Sipspa. And I'm also going to be talking to you about 5 books that I always recommend. Let's go ahead and get started with the books. So up first is The Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society by Marianne Schaefer and Annie Barrows. Now, this may come as a surprise to some of you who know me and know that I don't read a lot of historical fiction, but this is my favorite historical fiction and one of my favorite books of all time, probably too. I need to probably reread it because I want to make sure it's still one of my favorites of all time. But I have such good feelings associated with this book. I loved it so much. It is a historical fiction that is set during World War II, or it's actually following World War II, and it's all written in letters. So I love books that are written in letters. I found that out after reading Guernsey, and this is definitely a book that I recommend quite often. If you don't know what this book is about, it follows a woman named Juliet, and Juliet is a writer, but she has writer's block. She's been having trouble creating her new book. I believe she lives in London. I can't remember exactly where she's from, but I believe she lives in London. And she ends up getting a letter one day from a man named Dawsey, and Dawsey is from the island of Guernsey on the other side of the channel. And Dawsey ends up striking up this conversation with Juliet. He says, hey, I found your name written in this secondhand book, and I wanted to reach out to you and see if you wanted this book back because it had your name in it. I didn't know if you knew, it was being sold. And he reaches out. They end up striking up a conversation about the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society that formed during World War II. This is a group of people who essentially got caught out after hours during the war. And when they were asked what they were doing, they said, well, we're part of a book club. And so they formed this book club, and it just kind of shares Juliet's writing in these letters between her and Dawsey, and also her and some other members of the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society, and kind of how that helped them through a really dark time and how that gave them friendship and light in a time of war. And this book, if you love books and you love history, I just don't know how you could not love this book. It's so good. There's a little bit of a love story in there as well, but it's just one of my favorites. I really do need to do a reread of this, but it's so stinking good. If you have not read Guernsey, I'm recommending it again. If you love history and a little bit of a love story, books written in letters, and books in general, I highly recommend this one. Okay, now we get to talk about one of my favorite teas. So this is Rose Earl Grey tea, and it's from the company called Tea Drops. I found out about this company through Sipspa, no surprise. And in this was one that I didn't get this whole thing in Sipspa. I got this in Sipspa, a couple of these. But this tin, or it's not a tin, but this carton, I guess, is full of 10 of these. And I had never heard of tea drops or tea being steeped like this before. I think it's really interesting. I'm gonna insert like video clips of how I did this. So usually when I make tea, I will boil water in a kettle to whatever temperature that I need the tea, or the water boiled to, and then I will pour it over my tea. I usually use about a tablespoon of honey and a packet of Splenda to sweeten my tea. But these teas are actually, and you may see it in the video, these are like compacted tea leaves, and this one is like shaped like a flower, and because it's Rose Earl Grey. So what you do is you just drop this into your water and let it dissolve, and you stir it up. And what I do is I will go ahead and pour the water. I add my honey and my sweetener, which this has like a teaspoon of sugar in this drop, so I didn't have to sweeten it as much. But I usually go ahead and add that into my water, stir it up, then add the tea drop and kind of let it dissolve and stir it up. And the tea does sit at the bottom of your cup, so I don't usually drink the bottom. It's just like this much left with this in it, but you don't drink it. Like, you don't drink the tea leaves while you're drinking the tea. It stays at the bottom. But I thought this was really good, and the flavor is spot on. If you like Earl Grey tea and rose flavor, it's really good. The ingredients in this are organic raw sugar, organic Earl Grey, and organic rose petals. So pretty simple. This is really good. I'm not gonna really tell you how to make it because I assume if you want to make it, you'll get some and read the directions on it. But this is one of my absolute favorite teas. I think it may be my favorite tea of all time right now. It's so good, and I highly recommend trying out Tea Drops. The next book that I want to talk about that I always recommend is The OK Witch by Emma Steinkellner. This is a middle grade, kind of spooky, kind of witchy graphic novel that came out, I believe, just last year, or maybe 2019. I think it's 2019. But I love graphic novels. That's something that is fairly new. just in the last couple of years, I realized that graphic novels count as reading too. If audiobooks can count, graphic novels can count. There are words on these pages, even though there's pictures too. And there are actually lots of benefits to reading graphic novels, especially for younger kids. I'm not going to sit here and try to remember them and list them all off, but I have shared them before. And so hopefully that will inspire you to pick up graphic novels. I love them. Like, the art style in Emma Steinkellner's book is just absolutely phenomenal. I love this book, and it's actually a series. I have The OK Witch and The Hungry Shadow, which is book 2. And this is just a favorite. If you know me, you know that if you ask me to recommend a graphic novel, this is going to be the top one that I recommend. It gives me spooky vibes, which I love spooky books anyways. If you've been around any amount of time on my channel, you will know that. But it also reminds me of Halloween Town. If you've read this, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you have not, I don't want to spoil you, but it kind of gives me Halloween Town vibes and also Salem Witch Trials vibes. But it follows a 13-year-old girl named Moth, and Moth lives with her mom, and she wants nothing more than to be a witch, but alas, she is not one. Until one day she finds out she is actually part of a lineage of witches, but her mother has been hiding this from her to protect her because in the past there has been some turmoil between the founders of the city that they live in with witches. Like, there's just like been some drama between them. And yeah, I'm not going to say anything more than that. This is a great book, and again, I highly recommend it if you are looking for a graphic novel, especially if you are trying to get into reading graphic novels. I know it's middle grade, you guys, but middle grade graphic novels are far superior in my opinion, so definitely check this one out. All right, we're on to our next tea now, and that is Charities Berry Fields Forever. So again, this is from the company Charities. I discovered them also through Sipspa. This is my favorite fruity tea. If you like fruity teas, I find it hard to believe there's one better than this. This is the company that helped me realize that I love fruity teas. I was still kind of trying to discover what I liked in teas, and when I tried this one, I just knew it was it. So in the video, you can see that this is a very, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, chunky tea. Like, you've got different bits and pieces of things like hibiscus, elderberries, raisins, blackberries, raspberries, sour cherry, black currants, blueberries, and grapes in this mix of tea. So how I chose to do this one was I have all of these mugs that you see in this video, by the way, is the same mug, the clear mug. It's from David's Tea. I love it. It's insulated and it keeps my tea hotter for longer. And it also came with a tea infuser. That's the word I'm looking for, that I use also. So that's what I was using for steeping my tea. And this one, I just usually cover it up. It came with a lid, but that lid is broken to that mug. So I just like put a, what's it called? Like a pot holder or something on top of it, and then like sit the kettle on top so it kind of keeps the heat in while it's steeping. But I also add a tablespoon of honey and a little bit of sweetener to this one. But honestly, you probably don't really need anything because it's sweet enough with all of the fruit. But it is so good. The flavors in this tea are so potent. It's probably one of the most flavorful teas that I've ever had. So once again, if you like fruity teas, I highly recommend this one. It is so good and my favorite fruity tea that I have ever tried. The next book that I always recommend is Love and Other Words by Christina Lauren. This is an adult romance, and I don't read a lot of those either most of the time because I find it hard to avoid smut. So while we're here, if you have any adult romance recommendations for me that have no smut or very minimal smut, go ahead and drop those in the comments. I would love your recommendations. This book does have a little bit of smut. There were some things that kind of bothered me. Christina Lauren, which this is an author duo, if you don't know, Christina and Lauren wrote this together. And they have a habit of using the word growl in their books. And they also talk about other things that I'm not going to mention here because I'd like to keep this channel PG. But there's a little bit of like more than I would like to know in these romances. But I found this story extremely heartwarming. I loved it so much. It made me cry at the end. And this is a friends to lovers romance, which I find to be my favorite kind. I love childhood friendships that turn into love stories later on in life. So this says it's the story of the heart, or it says the story of the heart can never be unwritten. So this is a book about a girl named Macy, and Macy is an adult now, and she is getting ready to marry this man. She's like really well off financially. She's really secure and like she's a pediatrics resident and she's getting ready for her wedding. And then she ends up running into Elliot. And Elliot was her like only love of her life that she's ever had, basically, which I mean really says a lot about the guy she's about to marry. How do I say feel sorry for the dude? But you know, anyway, so she runs into Elliot and it goes back and forth. I love dual timelines. You guys know this. And so there's what happens in the past with Macy and Elliot, how they meet and how their story goes. And then present day when they're kind of recalling what's happened. And Macy's trying to figure out if she should give Elliot another chance. So this is like second chance romance, childhood, friends to lovers. I love it. But something happened in Macy's childhood that affected her and Elliot's relationship. We don't know what that is until the end, but you just kind of get to see, I love budding romances, like especially from kids. So you get to see how it all started, that they both had a love of books, that they shared their favorite words with each other, and all of the time that they spent together and just talked through life and growing pains and triumphs and all those different things. And oh my goodness, this is just, the book is so good. I wish it didn't have the little smutty elements in there, but it's like teen smut. It's not too bad, but like, just know there's a little bit. It's not overly excessive, but this story is worth every bit of it. Whenever somebody asks me what's a good romance, which I don't get asked that a lot because I don't read a lot of romances, but this one is top notch. This is my favorite. Like, there are other books that I really, really like, but there's something about this one, and maybe it's the book nerd in me, but I always come back to their relationship. Macy and Elliot are just, love it. If you have not checked out Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren, definitely pick this one up, especially if you like friends to lovers or like alternating timelines and stuff like that. This is such a sweet story and well worth your time to read it. The next tea that I'm going to talk about is not one that I found from Sipspa. It's actually one that I found out about from my sister-in-law, and she got this from Walmart. And so if you have a local Walmart, let me just tell you about Oregon chai, okay? So this is Oregon chai, the original chai tea latte. It's just a powder mix. I use a Keurig for this most of the time. I will just run the water and then like pour this in, mix it up. It doesn't need anything added. So basically, let's see, what is even in this? Sugar, dried whole milk, dried non-fat milk, dried honey, tapioca, maltodextrin, instant black tea, and natural flavor and salt. So if you're lactose intolerant, probably don't try this. But if you can have dairy, this would probably be a good one. Honestly, it doesn't, okay. So it's tea, but it reminds me a lot more of like a cappuccino or something like that. It's not coffee or anything of that sort, but it's more of a thicker, I think because of the milk, it's more of like a thicker mixture. And it's really good. It's a very easy tea to make. It's one of the quicker teas because I don't have to steep it or anything like that, but it hits the spot. It's a cozy drink as far as I'm concerned. Tea is a cozy drink, but this just is a different kind of cozy drink. It really hits the spot. I don't usually eat anything sweet with this. Like if I'm gonna eat with my teas, like sometimes I'll have candy or something, but I won't do that with this because this is super sweet. But yeah, if you're looking for something simple, have a Walmart near you, this is the way to go. It's a really good, easy tea powder mix to make, and it's also one of my favorites. The next book that I always recommend is Small Spaces by Catherine Arden. Now, this is the first book in a series, the second book being Dead Voices, and the third book actually just released, and it is called Dark Waters. I haven't gotten to that one yet, but the first two books have been absolutely phenomenal. If you like middle grade spooky stories, or if you're a fan of Goosebumps, if you grew up with Goosebumps and think those books are really good spooky stories, I think you will love this. This is like Goosebumps on steroids. Like, I was so spooked by this book by middle grade, which surprised me because it's a middle grade. But this book follows, let me see, what was their names? Ollie. So Ollie's 11 years old, and Ollie ends up finding this woman at this river or pond or body of water, at a river. So she's at this river. This woman is gonna like throw this book away, and Ollie loves books, and she's like, no, don't do that. And I could totally see myself doing that. Like, no, let me save the books. Anyway, so Ollie rescues this book, reads this story, and finds out that this story might be a little bit more true than she expected. Her and her classmates are on their way to a local farm on this field trip, and the farm is actually the place that the story she read, the spooky story called Small Spaces, took place. So Ollie and her two friends, whom I'm forgetting their names, and that's really bugging me because like I feel like I just read Dead Voices. So Ollie, and then she has a friend named Coco and Brian. So Ollie, Coco, and Brian are like the trio, the three musketeers. They get into some stuff with this book. There are some creepy scarecrows, a creepy smiling man. I will never look at scarecrows the same way again. If you are looking for a good spooky fall read, I highly recommend this one. We are approaching fall. I'm so excited to read Dark Waters and continue the series. It does still follow the three main characters in this book, and I would recommend reading them in order. Do not just read out of order, or don't just think you can read them by themselves. I definitely think you should start with Small Spaces. But once again, this is a book I always recommend. If you're looking for a good middle grade recommendation and you like spooky books or thrillers, this is such a good one. Catherine Arden's writing is so beautiful and so flowy. It reads so well, and the atmosphere in her books is intense. Do not read this book in the dark because it's super scary, but I do highly recommend it. The last tea that I want to talk to you about is David's Tea. This is an energizing tea from David's Tea, and it's called Just Beat It. Now, I'm actually out of this tea right now, so I'm gonna have to get some more, but this is another fruity tea. I really like this one. It has apple, raisins, hibiscus blossoms, beetroot, elderberries, carrot, green mate, goji berries, aronia berries, natural and artificial wild berry flavoring, blackberries, red currants, guarana seeds, raspberries, and cornflower blossoms. It also contains coconut. So this is one of my other favorite fruity teas. I was a little bit leery of it when it said there was coconut in there, and also when it said there was like beets and stuff and carrots. I was like, what the heck? But when all these things are blended together, it really does create such a great flavor. I mean, have I mentioned how much I love teas? You need to try this tea. This tea I actually chose to steep a different way. So I have a little contraption called Ingenuity. You can get this from Amazon or any other place that sells Ingenuity. I found out about this tea steeper contraption from Zoe Reads. She was using one, and I was like, oh my gosh, I have to have that. So what you do is you pour your tea leaves into it, and then pour your water in, and you let it steep. And once it's done steeping, you just sit the container on top of your mug, and it will drain the tea and leave the tea leaves in the top, so you don't have to worry about the tea leaves getting in your tea that you're going to drink. So I also really love this tea. I highly recommend it. I have tried quite a few David's teas, and they are all really good. David's Tea, unfortunately for me, is stationed in Canada, and so it's a little bit more expensive for me to get living in the States, but I do highly recommend it. It's super good, and I also recommend the mugs that I have showed throughout this video. I love their clear insulated mugs with the lid and the little diffuser or infuser. I keep saying diffuser. The infuser. It's very high quality, well worth the money, so I would highly recommend it. Now we're on to our last book, and this will probably come as no surprise to any of you, but the last book that I always recommend is The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. This was one of the first thrillers that I ever read, and it has stuck with me since then. It is just such a good story. Alex Michaelides has a way of pulling you into his writing. It starts out a little bit slow, but it's in the best way. It's kind of like a slow burn, and then the twist at the end had me gasping. I was like, what in the world just happened? What did I just read? This is such an interesting story, and it follows a psychotherapist named Theo. And Theo is obsessed with Alicia Berenson. Alicia Berenson had this seemingly perfect life, and then one day she decided to shoot her husband like 10 times. And she's been silent ever since. She's been in a psych ward, and nobody knows why she shot her husband, what went wrong, anything like that. And Theo is dead set on figuring out what happened and getting Alicia to speak. So that should be all you need to know to pick this book up. Let me just tell you, this is one of probably the most read thrillers that I've seen across BookTube and Bookstagram. It is so well loved. I know some people don't like it, but I feel like, especially if you are new to mysteries and thrillers, that you would probably really enjoy this one starting out. I think it's a good beginner, and that's why I recommend it to so many people. But also, as someone who has still read more and more thrillers, I always come back to this one. It is such a good one. Alex Michaelides has become an auto-buy author for me. He just released a new book called The Maidens, which I have on my shelves as well. I read it and I really enjoyed it. But The Silent Patient is just top-notch. If you like a good psychological thriller with a good twist, this is definitely your book. Alright y'all, that is all I have for you today. Thank you for joining me for my first episode of Steeped Reads. I hope you enjoyed learning about some of my favorite books and some of my favorite teas. Hopefully you got some good recommendations on both ends of that. If you liked this video, go ahead and hit the like button down below. And if you don't mind, also leave me a comment and let me know what books you always recommend and what teas you really enjoy, because I would love to learn about some more teas that I may not have gotten the opportunity to try yet. Thank you guys again so much for tuning in and stopping by, and I will see you in my next video. Bye, friends.